What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
Well, Joe, we have something special here on Educate Everyone, and that is a special discussion and interview today. Really kind of excited for not just our audience, but for me to meet LaVona Thomas. She is the education director at Middletree. And LaVona, thanks for being on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Joe kind of helped me set this up in terms of how did you and LaVona get together? Kind of lay this out for us.
You know, for a long while, I've always wanted someone to kind of take over the general educational happenings here at Middletree. You know, as the founder, you do a lot out of the gate to get everything within an organization square and on the level and make sure that your programs are running as best as can. But you're also, of course, you know, trying to get your books straight and get your personnel straight. And so you're wearing all these different hats out of the gate. And for a long while for us. But the director of education was always a position that I had wanted to have. And it was filled by a number of folks in the previous years. But they were people who maybe had just kind of come up with Middletree. And we really needed some outside perspective and somebody who could do the job in a way that the folks who had kind of grown with the organization couldn't. Just, again, that fresh perspective and fresh and new ideas. We really needed somebody to come in and manage our staff. And I was looking for somebody who had really a lot of experience within education, of course, right? Doing a number of different things. And so when we found LaVona, we had actually hired her sort of in tandem with another individual to kind of split the duties, so to speak. You know, here we are a number of months later. LaVona has the full grasp of the educational department and duties therein. You know, a lot of the job is not only just managing, like I mentioned before, like the programs and personnel, but sort of the direction and the setting the tone and culture and making sure that our staff knows what they're supposed to be doing, how they're doing it. Because, in education, there's a lot of folks who kind of come to us maybe with limited experience in the classroom, and we kind of give a lot of people their first shot and crack at an educational journey and job. And so it's LaVona and company, their job to make sure that all of those people are comfortable in doing what we ask of them on a daily basis, all the way up to the more seasoned professionals that we work with. LaVona does programs, she does personnel, she does students, she does it all.
She does a lot, it sounds like. So you have a big task at hand, LaVona. So tell us about you. Give us some of your background. Let us get to know you.
I am Dr. LaVona Thomas. I finished my doctorate last year, and I made my way to Middletree because I stepped out on faith and I decided to just focus on finishing my doctorate degree and needed a job afterwards. And I knew I didn't want to go back immediately to higher education where I have 20, 25 years of experience in leadership. I just wanted to stay in education, saw the job post, came in, had great conversations with Joe, and here I am.
Did you teach in college prior to coming to Middletree?
I have taught, but I have always been in upper administration, director of student success, director of student services, the registrar, anything that pertained to, I would say, the social development for the students and attrition and graduation. I've always worked in that realm.
But you've been doing this now a couple of decades. And,
yes.
Yep. And I have too, as well as teaching college. What have you seen change? If you can kind of contrast, because I was thinking about this the other day. If you can contrast from what students were like when you started to what students are like today. And if you can maybe hit some of the positive changes, maybe some of the not positive changes, kind of to help everybody understand what it's like to deal with young people nowadays.
You know, when I first started working, students wanted to be in college. They
Mm-hmm.
desired to be in college, and that was a goal not only set by their family, but it was a goal that they also set for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I would say around 2017, 18, you saw a slight change, but for sure with the pandemic and social media, students don't feel that college is a necessity unless they want to become something specific. Like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, and you know you need that education. But just to be there to say, like, oh, I'm here to get a degree in business, we've seen a decline in enrollment rates, a decline in graduation rates, because to me, students now feel as though they have another avenue to make monies, where we come from a generation where in order to make money, you had to have a degree, and that's not necessarily the truth. But then too, there's also a trend with trade schools, and trade schools are taking off because students are realizing, or I say potential students are realizing, like, hey, I can go to a trade school for A, B, C, or D and make just as much money versus spending 4 years in school and having this abundance of debt.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I agree with all of that. That is exactly what I'm seeing. Middle Tree focuses on younger students, college level students, but younger. What ages are you really targeting with Middle Tree?
TK through 12, I would say, for sure. And most of our partnerships stop at 8th grade, meaning with the school districts. But for our tutoring centers, we do go all the way to 12th. And we do have some college students who come in for, just say, major specific tutoring, or subject specific, I should say.
So 8th grade, we're looking at arguably about 13-ish, 13
Yes.
years old or so, like that.
Yes.
What are the challenges with working with young students?
I would say, honestly, and something that I've had discussions with some of our tutors, is the students have options where we didn't have an option. Like, hey, you know, your mom, your parents, or whomever your guardian felt like you needed tutoring. You went to tutoring. It was not an option to be like, I don't want to go, or I'm going to go, you could pay and I don't have to participate. So we're really seeing even a trend in the way parents are now parenting, and I would say even valuing education.
But are kids still
Need
anxious
it.
to learn?
Yes. And they're anxious to learn, but they're anxious to learn when they want to learn, or when they feel like learning is the downside to it. But they are all capable. It's just now we have to do an extra nudge and encouragement, and using a lot of the social emotional skills that we have, or being really positive reconstruction with our students, all those good things, just to keep them motivated. We have to be more hands-on now than ever before.
A really good point, right? Because everything is so on demand now.
Yes.
Right. Students, they want to do it when they want to do it. There are frequently times where I think we're up against this whole factor of, well, how come it has to be done this way? Because everything is so personalized now. And this kind of grappling between technology and what it is to be a student and how that interfaces. Because we've got all this stuff at our disposal, and yet we've got these old methodologies that are kind of clashing together right now. And we're still grappling with, how do you incorporate the tech with still these old methods that we've been using for such a long time. Whether or not you agree with how proficient those older methods maybe were or are, there's still this kind of figuring of, how do we incorporate the tech with what it is that we still need to get into these students' heads.
I agree. And another layer is, we live in the microwave generation. Like, everything is instant, everything is now. So even with the technology, how do we not depend on that and still teach our students how to think, how to logic, how to use their just even basic life skills? I feel like our students are lacking because everything is based on technology, the use of it.
You bring up life skills, LaVona, and that is something that really kind of has amazed me in dealing with my college students, and certainly it would apply to the younger ones as well. We learned our life skills in my generation from our parents.
Yes.
We did. I mean, my mom was the first one when I got my first job. got that bank account. How do you balance the checkbook? I mean, she sat me down and we learned to do it together. And now I'm finding
Yes.
college students go, what do you mean balance? What's a checkbook anyway?
And there were classes too, Tammy, in high school that you could do, like home ec classes, taught us how
Yes.
to cook,
Uh-huh.
career classes, taught
Yep.
us how to look for a job, how we should dress. Those have been extracted from pretty much every school district. And now it's just every man for himself.
That seems crazy to me because I'm dealing with college students who are deficit in so many things where I just go, what? What do you mean you don't know how to do that or what that is? It boggles my mind. It's like, the schools abandon it. The parents threw up their hands. Where is this disconnect? My gosh.
Yeah, so some of the parents are younger millennials who didn't know how to write a check because guess what? Checks were obsolete pretty much. So if I don't have that skill, I can't teach my child how to use that skill. So once again, if they're not doing it in schools and parents simply don't know, my daughter, she's now a vice principal, but she taught elementary and I would volunteer in her class. And they take the kids to computer lab. They don't know how to write in cursive, but they teach them how to type. You learn how to type, but you don't know how to write in cursive. So now you have to sign a document. You don't know how to sign your name.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even think about it falling all the way
Nope.
to a signature.
And America's solution is, guess what? E-sign.
Oh yeah.
Just
Right.
good old e-sign. So
Right.
there we are. We're still relying on technology and not teaching basic skills, how
Oh
to
my
sign your name.
goodness. And if you've ever, and I know everybody has, signed one of those pads where you use your finger, that looks nothing like anything remotely resembling your name,
No.
whatever squiggle you make. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so here's kind of a crazy thing. There are a couple of things, right? That it just goes back to what I was saying before about we just don't really know how to interface the technology with what it is that we want to teach students right now. Something that we saw originally was that when we were starting Middle Tree, Tammy, you asked what was the difference in students? And I thought their literary skills, they're very literate because we read a ton now, right?
Right.
But students have a difficult time putting that back onto the page. And what I mean by that is we used to teach handwriting, not only handwriting, we used to teach cursive. Students even, did calligraphy and was kind of almost not standard, but that was something you could do in art.
Right.
Where for a while, when we started Middle Tree a decade ago, we were seeing that handwriting was kind of falling off, but everybody was becoming like a really good typer. Well, now students don't know how to really even type because they do it with their thumbs. And now what we've seen is they don't really even do that because they just talk text everything, right? Or you can just speak and the words come up right on the page or whatever. And AI can help you with that. And there's no real need to be able to have that skill. So this is again where it's like, well, what do we do with that? And everything is so personalized, like LaVona was saying, that the teachers don't even know, or maybe the educational system in general doesn't even know how to direct people towards what it is that students should be learning. I mean, we have standards, right? We have Common Core standards, which is something that most states' educational systems have adopted. But again, how do you transmit that information? Everything is so personalized. You don't have to balance the checkbook now because wherever you bank, and back in the day, there was not many options to either as your local bank and maybe a couple of larger ones. But now there's all sorts of different options and all sorts of different banks have all sorts of different interfaces with their applications and ways that you can get statements and digest things. And so there's no one common way to do anything anymore, it seems like, because the technology is so vast, varied, and open. And what's more is that users can actually help now create and code a lot of the technology and personalize even that. So a big question is, how do you really come to terms with the personalization that technology affords and still get students or people in general just to educate themselves in a way there is still some guidance and that there is still some way by which we can point students towards what's important and what's not. Then again, who makes those decisions as to what's important? Students have so much access to so much information right now. And I think that this is probably a good thing, that they can kind of decide for themselves what's important and what's not. But then again, of course, there's a conflict there. If a school in an authoritarian kind of way or institution comes at people and says, well, this is what's important. And yet students, because of this vast exposure that they get online, might have a different value system entirely. So again, where do those things meet as well?
It used to be, I know when I was a kid in school, your teacher was the fountain of information. You went to them for everything. And recently, I had occasion to work with some 3rd through 5th graders, which was eye-opening, to say the least. Yeah. And I had one young man, and he was, an old-fashioned word is precocious. And this kid had a smartwatch. And anything I said would be checked on that smartwatch. And he would either add to what I said or disagree with me. We're talking about a 4th grader here. It was unsettling. It was difficult. It was tricky. And I'm wondering how teachers are expected to handle all of this, because the role, it's not teacher and then students. It almost seems like one big cacophony nowadays.
And it is. It definitely is. Speaking with teachers, I have a few in my family. They feel defeated at times for those reasons. It's just, even being a parent, let's back up. How do you now? I didn't have to parent a cell phone. I didn't have to parent a laptop. So I wouldn't even know where to start, Tammy. But when you're in front of a class and put your phones away. Okay, cool. I'll put it away. Oh, now put your watch away.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll put it away.
Yeah.
Now put your tablet away. Like, OMG. Like, what else do you have? And even once again, to me, it starts at home. Like, having those conversations. Dinner time with my children was such an important part of the day. Breakfast, you're up, you're moving, you're on the go. But
right.
Dinner, sit down, have a conversation, pick their brains, have them have a conversation, speak back. How was your day? Open-ended questions, just so we even learn the basics of communication. So therefore, they're able to communicate with older generations. They're able to even do some modeling just naturally with their children, because children will emulate the others. So if they see another one talking, dancing, singing, they're going to do the same. But when we're all on our phones, heads down, texting, typing away, that's just the nature of the beast. And you can't really, in my opinion, control the use of technology. We can only control it so far.
Yeah.
When I was working at my last job, Chat GPT had just really became popular, and students were, of course, using it, and other forms of AI. And finally, one of the professors said, we're trying to control this like we did the scientific calculator. We said that was cheating. And essentially, guess what? Now it's even more advanced than a scientific calculator. We just really can't control it. We just have to teach our students how to use it properly.
That's a great analogy, too. Yeah.
It's the question within not only education, but within society itself, is the interfacing of technology with the individual. And what that looks like for education is, again, something that we really, really have to work out. And I don't know that there's any way to work it out other than to just kind of go along with it and ride the wave and see, what becomes of it all. Because again, how do you guide students towards what it is that you want to disseminate to them when you do have a 4th grader fact checking you? The whole point of education is to get people information, right?
Yeah.
And we want to get them the best information that's absolutely possible. So is it necessarily bad that we've got that at our disposal? No, that's great. But now how is that disseminated? I don't even want to say the word, how is that controlled? Because I don't think that's what we want to do either within education. We want to guide, we want to steer, we want to positively encourage people to use it and employ it in a way that suits them appropriately and productively. So I think that those are kind of the things that we're up against. And there's so much new stuff that comes out all the time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? Yeah. So how do you keep up with that? I don't know. If you can figure that out, then I think you've created the new way forward within the educational
You would not be here with us for sure.
Well, with all of this, with the technology, with the changes in communication, with the changes in just how children function, because they're certainly a lot more sophisticated because of all the knowledge they have access to. How do we teach? How do we make these classes work? I know that's like the $1 million question, I think, but what would you tell a teacher right now?
That's difficult because in one breath, I mean, of course, technology is not going anywhere. It's just going to keep getting more and
Mm-hmm.
more advanced. But I'm still so old school. And I just
Yes.
think teachers need to implement still the old school values. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's just some things like, although you can use technology, we have to teach our students how to think independently
Mm-hmm.
without technology. Because I always say, what happens when the world sits still because the technology is down?
Uh-huh.
Which can
Uh-huh.
happen. If man can create it, man can destroy it.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're just going to have a world full of people, young adults, who don't know how to think. Because guess what? I've always just spoken to my phone. Hey, Google, search this. Or hey,
Mm-hmm.
so and so, find this out. I can't release some of my old school values and expectations.
Me
And
neither.
I think it
Yeah.
starts at home, and I can't. I looked at too many college students who would come into advising
Mm-hmm.
and can't articulate how to help me look for my classes.
Uh-huh.
Just simple things because they are so introverted and attached to their devices, they still don't know how to communicate. So we have to keep some old school values in place.
It's a really good point, LaVona, because so much of what we do starts at home. So much of what society is based on starts with the family. And you want to look at crime rates amongst certain groups. You want to look at the importance of emphasis on education within certain cultures and in certain societies and in certain histories. Where values come from generally starts around the dinner table, or generally starts from parents, from a strong familial tree, a structure in place inherently for kids themselves when they're first encountering the world. Because that compass, if it goes unchecked, then the internet is going to raise all of our kids. I'm not sure that that's necessarily what would be the best for us, at least at this juncture, as it's so new, right? So the value systems and the value of families and the value of having people who love and care for you firmly entrenched is so important. And it does come to inform so much of what happens within society. Education very much included within all of that. So it's another interesting thing to think about and talk about is how does technology affect the education of the familial unit
Mm-hmm.
itself?
Exactly.
Because there used to be a very, very expected structure not that long ago, right? The early 1900s there, the family structure. I mean, and of course, previously that was typical. I mean, that was absolutely the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere within the last 40 to 50 years, that's begun to, I don't want to say break apart and make it sound negative or anything, but it's not necessarily, at least in this country, as commonplace. Single parenting has become much more the norm. Divorce rates are much higher than they ever have been.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something also happening, and I kind of wonder if it isn't partly because of also the exposure to individuals of all this other information, of all these other people. And that even happened before the internet. The more we got connected, the more we got exposed to, the more that we start to understand things about the world that maybe we hadn't had access to previously. I don't think it's a coincidence that those two things kind of came up at the same time, and that traditional structure began to break apart there.
Do you think maybe we have to swing back a little? Maybe we've swung too far, because we've talked about eliminating the learning of cursive, which, again, I hadn't even thought about. That pertains to how do I actually sign my name on a handwritten document. Oh my gosh. But I hadn't even really thought of that, LaVona. But also, I know many schools are taking out clocks in favor
Yes.
of digital clocks. Because, and again, this is going to sound so strange to actually articulate, students can't tell time on clocks with hands.
No.
Have we swung too far? Do we need to drag that back a little bit?
Yes, we do. another, I would say, curse with technology is my mom has a child care, and one little boy, they were kept saying, he's 2, he's nonverbal, he's nonverbal.
Oh,
And my mom, being old school, she was like, he doesn't have the tablet here and he talks. I promise.
uh-huh.
Mom took the tablet away and he became a chatterbox.
Oh my gosh.
So when you have technology, even babysitting your kids because you're busy, we live life on the go, that technology can become a hindrance in someone's ability to learn, to speak, to once again do the basics. So, in my opinion, yes, we need to wind back the hands of time if we could and just go back to some of these traditional learnings. Kids can't count money. Guess what? When's the last
Oh,
time, Tammy, you held a quarter in your hand? When's the last time someone said, give me 55 cents, and you had to count out 55 cents? You did it
of
because you have a
course.
debit card and you slide your card for however much it is and you just go on about our day. Time and money in elementary school were taught together. So now
Yeah.
we're moving to digital clocks and we're moving to debit and credit. So there's no need to physically count monies the way we used to also.
Well, I've got to share a really interesting story that just illustrates where we might be going, what brick wall we're about to slam into. Because I went to the gas station yesterday morning. My car was on fumes, and I went to the pump and it said pay inside. And I begrudgingly grabbed my debit card and marched inside. And the man inside, I said, $30 on number 4. And he said, sorry, our debit card reader is out. We're only taking cash. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I thought, wait, I've got a $20 bill. I actually really do. And I ran out to the car and got my little 20, which put about 4 gallons in. But these other people who are realizing the same thing coming in, thinking they're going to pay inside, they're like, well, I don't have any cash. Well, I'm out of gas. What am I supposed to do? Oh my gosh. There was really about 5 people in there panicking. Now, I had my 20, but they were panicking.
Yes.
Because they didn't have a methodology to put gas in their cars. And like a lot of us, foolishly, they had let it run down to fumes.
When you have cash, think about it, Tammy. No one ever counts back. Like,
No.
okay, they give you the coins and say, okay, that's 5, and then some 1, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know what I
No.
mean? Or anything. They just hand you your money.
Right.
No one counts back cash because guess what?
They
Most
can't.
people cannot because they haven't had to. Those young adults have not had to.
So our technology is smarting us up and dumbing us down.
Yes.
Yikes. This is not good.
It's scary, right?
It really is. So are we close to a tipping point where this starts to be realized, or is that still way far ahead?
I think way far ahead. I think that
Wow.
most people, especially those that don't work in education, just think that the world is changing and they want to change with it. So, okay, we use debit. I don't know how to count cash. I don't know how to count cash. It's just becoming the norm. I don't know how to tell time on an analog. I need a digital. It's just the norm. And I think that we are just going to come to a point where things are just the norm. And then I'll be the old lady preaching. Back in my day, I knew how to A, B, C, and D. And they'll be like, good for you, grandma. But guess what? That's not how it's done.
I'll be right with you. So, but in the meantime, we've got this generation of kids, young ones coming up, that if that tipping point is way far down in the future, they are going to be very unable to function in so many ways that truly are important.
Yes.
Every generation is important on the structure and the process of the grander movement, and every happening therein is important in the structure and the process on the grander movement. So, when they transition from the abacus to the calculator or whatever, right? I don't think anybody was like, oh my God, how are students going to learn if they don't know how to read an abacus or use an abacus? We're at a similar place here. So I would hesitate to call it good, bad, or indifferent at this point. It's what it is. And we're very quick to always label things, as a certain way. And I think what we need to do, and I think what would be probably the best and most important thing for us as educators and as a society, is to teach people how to think rather than, and I mean, Tammy, you and I are, if we haven't already on this podcast, going to talk quite a bit more about this exact happening. But giving students the skills of critical thought, of how to think, of how to realize who they are, how to personalize their own life experience, is where this kind of comes into the fray of the technology piece being what it is. Because yes, it is critical for us to have some very basic understandings of what it is to be a human being. But what those understandings are also always going to evolve and change themselves. That's why I say there's no such thing as anything really being lost or anything being a catastrophe so far as where we're at on the learning process, or, oh my gosh, we don't know how to read a manual, whatever, the old school clocks, or counting money, or doing whatever. Because, I mean, who needs to count money if there aren't any dollars anymore, or there aren't any analog clocks out there? I would say that we need to kind of embrace it and yet still figure out what it is to be a human being at this present moment and what's important there. And I think that's what education can help us with. Because again, grappling with the technology itself, it is the $1 million question. Mm-hmm. Not $1 million, it's going to be a $1 billion question, right? But that's going to happen however it does. We need to focus on the human aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Because whatever the details emerge, however those emerge, whatever they might be, is going to be whatever it is, just due to the technology and due to that interaction between human beings and that tech. So kind of like what we were saying before, isn't it really important to get those values down, to get the family strong again, to get that person-to-person connection? Maybe that's the $1 billion question, is how can technology continue to give us a better human experience, and a better human experience amongst ourselves, and more connected to human beings? And maybe that's what we need to focus on.
Get away from people at dinner, at a restaurant, each playing on their phones and not having conversation.
But maybe that's kind of what it is, because we're all saying we're at a very interesting crossroads ourselves, being that we lived through the analog time, right? Uh-huh. Like before the digitized and the internet age. We lived in this analog era where everything was very manual and very, look you in the eye and person to person. But we also have now lived through this crossing over of this great technological revolution. And it's a revolution where we're not sure what's really going to happen. I think that's always what occurs within a revolution, is there's an uprising and we think we know what's going to happen. And then whatever we thought was going to happen generally doesn't shake out that way. But here, this just sort of was thrust upon us. Like, we went from having no idea what ChatGPT was literally 2 years ago,
right,
to where now everybody uses it. Like, not only does everybody know what it is, everybody uses it, even almost whether they want to or not. It's just there. So it's happened really quickly. And we might sound kind of very old school saying, gosh, we need to get back to this way or that way. I would say we need to embrace where we are right now, and then acknowledge the past and understand what human beings were, but also try to understand and accept where we are currently and figure out a path by which to go forward from here, while also trying to understand like what's important about being a human being right now. There
is a lot more to talk about on this topic, and we are going to do that in other episodes of Educate Everyone. But LaVona, you have really got us thinking about so many things, and I appreciate you coming on with Joe and myself today. Dr. LaVona Thomas, she is the Education Director at Middletree. LaVona, a closing thought for parents who listened and went, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do?
Just spend time with your children. Still have those conversations. Keep those old school values. If you have your even grandmas who are still in play, great grandparents, allow them to share their stories and their life experiences as well. And also something that we do with my mom is we teach her about technology so she's not afraid of it. So I think families can learn from one another.
Joe, any closing thoughts?
No, I think that's perfect, because again, we're at this super interesting crossroads of this transitional point of humanity, of what it is to be a human being. Because like I just said, we remember how it was before tech was so invasive in every aspect of our lives. And we are bridging the gap. We are paving the way for technology to be infused within what it is to be a human being here in the future. So it's just a really interesting time. And like LaVona said, I think you have to make sure if there's one thing that we do that there's a value system still in place, not to say that needs to look a particular way. It can look different based on who we are or who you are as an individual or as a society or as a culture. But I would say that that's what we need to maybe look at, think about, focus on those values. What is it to be human? How is it that we want to be treated and treat others? And what is it that we want our society to look like? And then we can have the technology to help us get there.
Great jumping off point. More ahead on Educate Everyone.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.